Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you everyone for joining us again for another episode of Sessions with the Sayyid. Assalamu alaikum Sayyidina, how are you doing today?
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. I'm doing well. How are you, Ahmed?
Alhamdulillah, it's good to have you here once again.
Thank you.
So today's topic has to do with God in the light of human suffering. So what this means is when us humans deal with suffering, such as natural disasters, for example, crimes, plagues, things of that nature, why does God allow this? Does He give this to us? Or is it the cause of our own suffering?
You mean, why are there problems, issues, evil, suffering when we know God to be good, right?
Exactly.
We describe God in terms like omnipotent, benevolent, omniscient, these sort of things. So why is there suffering? So it's not humans that suffer. The animal kingdom suffers, the earth suffers, and we can give reasons. But let's understand what we're talking about. Suffering. We're asking, why is there suffering in light of God being good? First of all, is suffering evil? What do you think?
Do I think suffering is evil? Not necessarily, only because I believe that humans themselves can sometimes bring, or for the most part, they bring a lot of the suffering
So
upon
if they
themselves.
bring it, did they bring good or evil?
It could start with evil, or it could start with good.
So is suffering objectively evil or good?
I would argue that it's evil.
So yeah, no one will say, I'm suffering today, that's good, right? No one will say that. But in reality, suffering is not something that's objectively evil. We go to the gym, we suffer, but we know that there's a good out of this. We suffer through school, you know? I'm sure you suffered a lot. I know I did. I'm currently suffering. But that's just the rules of the game. And we're here to play the game based on that rule. And the rules are what? The rules of life. Life, if you want to improve, you have to suffer. You know, there's this nice example I always keep referring back to when I think of problems and then the good that comes out of it. A butterfly, when it is in the phase inside what is it called? The chrysalis or the cocoon. It suffers to get out of it after the time it spends in there. And it is encouraged that you don't help the butterfly. So it's discouraged that if you help it, because it's just trying to break free. But the process of it breaking free helps the insect develop more strength because it's almost like a workout. So it could go on for hours just trying its hardest to push through. So you can see this wiggling, and let me help the poor guy, he's suffering. But no, by helping him, he'll later die because he hasn't developed the strength through this quote-unquote workout. So him suffering was a good thing. So now when we're talking about why is there suffering in light of God being good, is that just God being good, giving us problems? There's a beautiful quote, by the way. I asked God for strength, and He gave me problems to solve. That's a beautiful way to think about this. But now, I think let's go more towards objective evils. Because can we establish that suffering is evil or good? What do we say?
If I were to go up to you and just punch you in the gut,
so
I caused your suffering.
So I would be heartbroken because you're my brother. I don't know why you... But
I wouldn't do that, but I'm just...
So I would be heartbroken. But still, nonetheless, in general, murder, that's evil, right? Murder is evil.
That is evil.
Injustice, oppression, taking advantage of others, abusing their rights, right?
Yeah.
Could we say that's evil?
I would say that's evil.
Would you say that's suffering?
Yeah, I would say that's suffering.
So not all suffering is evil. Some parts of it, whatever.
Some may argue that suffering can bring about good, like maybe at the end of it, because I don't think anyone would say that suffering itself is something enjoyable, as you mentioned earlier. But
people enjoy knowing that there are problems in life, that there are obstacles. People do this all the time. They go through courses, struggles. People don't want to sit home and be a blob, so they make sure that there are things they can do.
It improves upon them in a way, but when we talk about this type of suffering, for example, with crime, like I said, if I were to just walk up to you and hit you, is that going to improve you in some way?
No, but I will become more alert next time not to go to your neighborhood anymore. But here's let's get to this then. I think when people pose this question, can we establish that God is good? Adala, adil, from the names of God, adil, from the usul of deen, adala, that God is just. Is it just? Now here's the proper worded format to say that is it just to have a God who allows for the capability of producing evil? So now the question is the source of evil. I would agree with you and concede that it would be bad if God did evil. Would that be good for God to do or no?
No.
But God is all good, right?
God is good.
So can God do evil?
He doesn't do evil.
There's an ayah of the Quran that says that. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ مِنْ شَرِّ مَا خَلَقَ. I seek refuge to the Lord of the Falaq from the evil of the creation that He created. Not from the evil He created. From the evil of the creation He created. So He created creation that has the capability of doing evil. When the creation has the capability of doing evil, that means it made a decision voluntarily to either do good or evil. Now, the real question is, why would God allow creation the option to do evil and not just allow it to do good? Now, if God created humans with the capability of only doing good and not evil, there is no distinguish between the human and the angel all of a sudden. And humans are not angels. We're different entities. They're created from light, we're created from mud, and things of that nature. Rather, God gave us, and this is the whole free will and predestination discussion now, gave us the ability to make our own choices. It is better to have the choice to do evil and avoid doing evil as opposed to having no other choice but to do good. Why? Because you ended up doing good with effort, whereas the angels do good effortlessly. What's more commendable? That you put effort? Yada. I mean, exactly. Imagine you go through medical school and you did put no effort and you didn't study and you didn't do anything. You're interested in going to the medical field?
I'm not.
Cybersecurity.
There you go.
Forgive me. But didn't you want to do medicine?
Maybe in a past life.
I don't know. Okay, never mind. So it's a tough route. I have family that are in that area. It's crazy, man. They go for medical school, then rotations, and all of the whole cycle is just difficult.
You have to put in the work for it to pay off.
Yeah, it's probably minimum like 15 years if you want to end up being a proper hospitalist, let's say. Imagine a person begins the process, the next day they didn't put any effort, they gave them their degrees and credentials and medical license.
Yeah, I wouldn't be.
I would not commend that. You didn't put any work, nothing. It was just offered to you because this is how the program was. Whereas I had to suffer. I saw the haram that I could have done. You could have punched me in the gut like you said the other time, but you decided not to. I might have deserved it, for example, but you know that that's not good. So there is a commendable understanding when someone avoids doing evil when they could have done it. That's called being principled. So that's from the human point of view. Fine.
I see your points. I think I know what you're about to get at here too. But what about the instances in which that we don't control?
So that's from the human point of view.
Yeah.
Fine. How about... So let's just one more point on this. People go to war. People kill each other. People cause plagues. People cause issues. And then people turn around and go like, why did you let this happen? Well, who did it?
It was us that did it.
So who did it? So he did it. You decided to vote for a maniac. You decided to be complacent when there was injustice. You decided not to do anything you were quiet when you saw injustice and poverty and issues like that. You could have changed it. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, if you see injustice, change it with your hands. If you can't change it with your hands, change it with your tongue. If you can't change it with your tongue, change it with your heart. Pray. Make dua. Ya Allah, I can't do anything. This problem is happening on the other side of the world. Maybe I can message, call, support an NGO, donate, charity. If I can't really do that, a social media post, bring awareness, I can't really do that. Ya Allah, Allahumma, man arada bil islami su'an farudda kaydahu ila nahrihi. Make dua, for example. So people are the cause of all of their evil. They really are. God doesn't bring evil. God brings us trials and tests, but trials and tests are not considered evil. Like a professor, you wouldn't go to your professor and say, hey, the final exam, why did you give me multiple choice? Just give me the right answer as the only choice. Are you silly? The professor would be like, Habibi, take your pencil and go home. Because that's not the nature of school and study. What's the nature of school and study? The nature is that we have to test you. So we're going to put 4 wrong answers and we're going to put 1 right one. You have to use your intuition and your study and your hard work to find which one's the right one. God brought you many ways to do wrong, but there's like a one way to do good. And in fact, there are many ways to do good. In fact, there are more ways to do good than there are ways to do wrong in this life. Does it take religion to tell people not to kill others? It shouldn't. People still do so. People of religion still do so, but they were never following rules to begin with. It's from the human essence that we all understand there's objective truth and reality. Abuse is wrong. You know, these are the charters of human rights that are inalienable that you cannot take away from others. You don't need dogma to tell you that, but sometimes you need a support system to remind you. In this case, I can't go like, Ya Allah, why did you give me so many bad options? But you knew the right ones though. It wasn't that difficult to be like, maybe cheating someone is wrong. Maybe taking their wealth is wrong. The answer was obvious. Now imagine a multiple choice. You have obvious right answers, but you still went for the wrong one. Who did the evil all of a sudden?
It was the test taker.
The test taker or the test maker? The test taker or the test maker, Ahmed? Who did the evil?
If all the questions were the wrong ones,
Yeah,
not a single right one, it's the test maker.
I would agree.
But if there's a bunch of wrong ones and one right one, it's a test taker
Test taker.
who chose the wrong one.
And if they deliberately chose the wrong one, deliberately, knowing what the right one was.
They brought it up on
Imagine
themselves,
that. You're
yeah.
taking the test. I know the right answer. Deliberately, I'm going to avoid it. What's wrong with you?
They-
Sabah al-khair.
They brought it up on themselves.
Why'd you do that? Now, what if there was only one wrong answer, but 10 right answers? And you still chose the wrong one.
I don't even know what to say about that.
That's life. Life. It's so easy to get into Jannah. Oh my God, bro. So easy. But people decide where is the one wrong way, and I want to go there because it happens to be instant gratification, tastier, funner, quicker. For this, I have to be patient. That's why God stresses patience. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ, for example. And these are helpful reminders. But let's go back to the other issue. Evil on humans, we may have established that one. What about, can you say an earthquake is evil?
So for me, when I view something like that, we might have to distinguish. Well, I don't know if you agree with me on this,
Sure.
but we might have to distinguish between something that is given to us as a trial, like an earthquake,
Okay.
or if it's a punishment upon the people, maybe because we see examples from the Quran about people who did wrong or who were doing evil, and Allah brought down His wrath upon them.
So there is that, by the way. God can punish people. And it's a rahmah that Allah punishes people on the earth because that saves them from the punishment of the akhirah potentially. But to your point, it could be a test. But at the same time, where are the most earthquakes in the world? Like where would you say there's a hot concentration of earthquakes?
If I'm going to say in the United States, I know in
like
California,
California?
yeah, they get a
California,
lot of earthquakes,
right?
Yeah.
So if someone knows that there are earthquakes in an area, and they still move there, you knew that this is where tectonic plates does their thing. You still said, I'm willing to take the risk. A problem happens. You then turn, why did you let this happen? You knew that there was going to be a high risk. You knew, and you still decided to go. I know that getting in my car, coming here today with you, first of all, is a big ni'mah and wonderful cameraman. It's a big ni'mah to be in your company. But I know there's a chance on the road that someone might be a maniac and might not drive properly, and there's a risk that I could get hit and get hurt. Yeah, I still took that risk. I still did it. Why did I do that? Because I know that it's probably very low, it's probably whatever. But if it does happen, do I complain? I can complain. I have the right to complain. But did I ever sign up for a perfect road condition? Is that something that we ever sign up for? We know that there's no such thing. You could drive perfectly, but if there are people that just decide not to, I can't control what a person drinks right before they get into their car. I can't do that. So I know there are risks. If I'm willing to accept these risks, I have to be willing, and this is the hard truth to be honest with you, I have to be willing to accept that if I get hurt, that was my decision. I could have stayed home today. I decided not to, you know that? I could have stayed home, but I didn't want to do that today. So if I'm willing to take the risk, I have to be able to accept that there are consequences, either for me or against me. If they happen against me, I could have avoided them. So for the whole earthquake thing, I could have avoided it. Someone once said, how about, what if my child gets eaten by a lion? So then, if I know there are risks, and I still decide to pursue and proceed, even if the risks are like 5%, it's not like every day we deal with earthquakes, for example. And by the way, I can only sympathize with people that have suffered through natural causes and disasters. So it's easier said than done for me, but it mathematically stays the reality that I know there are risks. Sometimes I have no choice, so I go. So that such is life. If I decide to go despite some of these risks, then I have to accept the consequences either for me or against me. Someone might say, okay, fine. You talk about natural disasters, tsunamis. Tsunamis, by the way, is an interesting one. Let's say a tsunami hits Japan. So they're prone to these things. The people that live by the coast will be like, this was horrible. The farmer that lives more inland will be like, thank you, I don't have to water. So to one of them, it's a niqmah. To the other, it's a ni'mah. So objectively, these things are just natural. And depending on the circumstance, it could be a net positive for many. Now, I'm not saying a world-class tsunami that destroys everyone was a positive thing all of a sudden. But it really is relative, whether it's on a micro or macro scale. Now, what if like someone says, I heard this one. So, what if my child gets eaten by a lion? By a lion. God can control the animals. Why didn't he do that? Why are you where lions are? Why are you then also your child, man, keep a hold on your kid. If a child got ate by a lion, you're a child, right? You need to make sure you have your children with you, especially if you're in like some safari place. So there's a whole deal of responsibility that needs to be considered as well. Now, I'm talking about stuff that probably was in our control, in our hands, something that's not in our control. Like, listen, the only reason I moved to an area where there was a lot of quakes happening, I had no choice. I was a refugee. The only reason lion came and attacked, I live here. I can't go anywhere else. Those are valid points. But once again, this is not Jannah. This is dunya. The point of it is that there are obstacles. And where Allah takes, Allah gives. So for that reason, there are risks to all decisions in life. Sometimes it's worth taking those risks. If those consequences happen as a result of us taking those risks, what was evil about that? If we're talking good, evil, haram, halal, that kind, what was exactly evil? When this is just the natural circumstances and the way of life of things that I've already came to terms with, so it's harder to accept that some of the risks might manifest. It is harder. But what is exactly evil here?
So we discussed about how we kind of put ourselves in a position or in a place where earthquakes are prone to happen or hurricanes or something like that. But what about a flashback here to 2020 when the world faced a pandemic of COVID-19, for example? And a lot of people, we can say, have suffered because of it or suffered in some type of way. So we didn't bring that upon ourselves, did we? Or
well, many people will tell you that there are conspiracy theories. I don't know too much about the details of some of these things, but yeah, a pandemic usually is, if you look at the bubonic plague, where did it hit the most?
In Europe.
In Europe, why? Yeah. People weren't even bathing. They were not. People didn't have a sense of hygiene and sanitation. The Muslim world didn't really get affected by this, although plagues do exist, but not often in that part of the world. Why? Because we do wudu, ghusl. These things are strictly emphasized. Washing the hands before and after eating, washroom etiquette, things like that. So the risks are much less in that part of the world where people are observing sanitation, as opposed to the parts of the world where people aren't clean. And to them, germs are non-existent. And they eat whatever was on the floor, whatever their dogs ate, for example. That's a big problem. Many people will eat from what their dog ate from. They'll give them a bite, then they'll continue biting. The dog will lick. That you can wash up as much as you like, but if the dog is licking, eating, he doesn't follow these rules, and he comes and brings things back. Maybe subhanAllah from the hikmah why dogs are najis to us as Muslims, right? So again, just observing the human timeline, you will see and notice where human intervention was more or less likely, for example, the case of why human beings suffer.
But what about cases, like just regular cases, like getting a common cold? Some people will say that they suffer from that because...
the hadith says that a mu'min on the day of judgment, when they realize the amount of ajr they will receive after they've endured just a cold, they would wish that they never got healed, because Allah compensates people from their suffering. By the way, this is something that's also helpful to keep in mind. Allah will compensate us. We endured problems, pain, issues, suffering, sicknesses. How about people that are born with deficiencies? Literally, what's their issue? They didn't deserve that. They actually didn't. So what do we say to that? God will compensate. God does. If a person gets the common cold on the day of judgment, they would have wished they never got healed from the amount of thawab Allah will give them. As a Muslim, you endured, you suffered, you drowned, you were burned. These things God will keep in mind and take into consideration when addressing you, giving you. I remember a family can say, we lost our child, we suffered greatly. The amount of ahadith that talk about child loss in a family is a plethora amount, whereby the child is in the care of Ibrahim and his wife Sarah. The child will stand at the gates of Jannah and say, Ya Allah, I refuse to enter until my mom and dad enter with me. And a child is ma'soom, they don't have any sins. They're not obligated to it. So Allah will answer their call. The amount of what a person will get as a result of this. Someone also, for people of God, needs to keep that in mind as well. Suffering is not always bad. Like we mentioned earlier, there are benefits to going through problems and issues and trials. Injustice is bad. Oppression is bad. And if I am the victim of that, number one, I need to always remember God is the muntaqim. God will avenge me. So this is all going to be taken care of, don't worry. If not in this life, in the akhirah, 100%. Furthermore, ما تكبر أحد إلا لذلة وجدها في نفسه. No one becomes arrogant above others except that they found an insecurity in themselves. It shows their weakness. Don't think that they're actually strong or say, I get oppressed, I get bullied. There are people that do this because they're weak actually. So in reality, you're not the weak one, even though you're subject and you're the victim and you're subject to the hatred and oppression. The reality is they are the ones that are weak-hearted. And why does it matter in my life if I don't see retribution yet? God is a good God. Adala, things of that nature. These are helpful reminders to keep in mind. So what can we say about God in light of human suffering is that suffering is not evil. Not evil. When evil is done, it's by our own hands. People are evil. God gives us many avenues and ways to do good. We decided to do the one that's wrong. In regards to the natural way of life, such is the system of God. Earthquakes must happen to create new, to replenish, to refresh, to start more islands. You know, the natural way of life. That's how Earth functions, and this is the system. We chose, not like we chose to live on it, but we choose to accept it. If we choose to refuse and we choose to reject, we're not going to live our lives. Learn to accept these are the circumstances, but what can you do to optimize it? There are always opportunities to do that. And you work your best and you do your hardest, inshallah.
So to close out this episode, I just want to ask you about maybe some examples that we see from the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, or just any example that you have of someone who has suffered and the reward that they received is greater than...
I'll summarize it. Ready? Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam, when she talks to Ibn Ziyad, he says to her, what did you see in regards to what God has done to your family? She says, Salamullahi alayha ma ra'aytu illa jamila. Suffering, beautiful in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let's take a leaf from the page of our role models, particularly as we're in these times of Muharram, Safar, and onwards. Every day we remember suffering. If it's in the way of God and we do it with God in mind, it is the most beautiful thing that we will ever see in our lives.
It's a perfect way to close out this topic. Thank you so much, Sayyidina, for joining us today and talking to us about this topic.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.